The Flash is one of, if not the fastest character in the entirety of the DC universe. He can easily outrun any other hero, but with his speed comes a deadly secret that was only found out through Wally West's long-forgotten son, David. Not just that, but the comic featuring him has some insane twists in it as well. Let's dive deeper into it. Starting with insane speed, while the hero does admittedly lack in a lot of areas such as strength, he more than makes up for it with just how fast he is. In fact, he's so fast that he could easily beat Superman in a race. While the character is able to run at speeds that are at times faster than light, the only reason he can properly pull it off is that he's always protected by a Speed Force aura around his body. If the character didn't have this aura, he would in an instant be turned into a shred anytime he would use his speed. That's exactly what Wally's first son David faced. West's long-forgotten child was first shown off to readers all the way back in 1987's Flash Annual number 4, made by Mark Waid and Craig Brassfield. In the issue, we get to see the time traveler Wave Rider try to find out which hero would turn out to be the Tyrant Monarch in the future. To do this, he looks into all of their futures, and in Wally's future, he sees that the character would be forced to give up being a hero, settle down, and start a family. Coming up, the reality of speed powers is horrifying. The idea of being as fast as light is certainly super appealing, especially since you'd never have to get stuck in traffic and could visit anywhere on Earth in an instant. But the reality of it is much more terrifying. The ability to run that fast without anything saving you from the friction is going to shred a normal human right to the bone, and that's exactly what David faces. Anytime that the character uses his powers, he has a risk of being shredded completely. However, it's understandable since the Speed Force lets people run super fast, so fast that the Flash once overtook himself. While the character was later on able to get over his weaknesses as Wally West gave him all of his powers, it still changes nothing about the true nature of their powers. While it may be a cool power, it also heavily depends on the user generating a force field around them, or else they will meet a tragic end. Moving on to a superhero's dream, it's often nearly impossible for superheroes to be normal again, but Wally West used to have a kid who proved it for him. With a constantly growing family of speedsters, the character was thinking of settling down for a couple of years, even hanging up his costume once, but then found himself dragged back into his old life where his friends needed his help. That's not the only reason why he can't ever escape the life of a hero. Once, we got to see Wally settle down with an entire family of his own away from his speed. A possible future where he could settle down, the character even changed his name and settled out in the suburbs with a wonderful wife and a son called David. Their life was normal until they discovered that David, much like his father, was fast. In an impulsive decision, David rushed over to save a girl from being hit by a car. It seems like he inherited more than just the Flash's speed, but also his determination and heroic nature. Despite the good deed, the character was hurt by his powers and his body couldn't handle the force. Next up is the Flash Annual number 4. In the annual Flash comic by Mark Waid and Craig Brassfield, the son of Wally West's Flash ends up suffering from severe wounds because of his powers, something the hero had to come to terms with becoming a part of their life. Not just that, but Wally realized that he could never fully escape the speed no matter how hard he tried. Soon it was proven that danger was always going to follow him. While his son was stuck in the hospital, one of his ex-villains had tracked his family down to set in motion a diabolical plan. The villain then kidnaps David, and Wally has to fight off a lot of his old foes to finally get him back. Despite the hero's attempts at changing his identity and moving to the suburbs, his past was always going to catch up to him. After a long battle, the hero came out on top, winning over his foes again, but now he had a bigger choice to either be the Flash again or try to live a normal life. And after David used his powers and got kidnapped, we knew that the hero would never be able to live a normal life. Let's take a look at the comic. We start the comic off with Wally enjoying his time at Keystone's celebration of Flash Day. We've got some humor from friends of the hero, and it kicks off the point in the story pretty fast. Bonnie is just about to show the hero some papers when Wave Rider comes out to touch him. Instantly, we're taken to the future in the year 2001. We get to meet Mike Edwards and his wife Diane along with their son David, but then later we find out that Mike is indeed Wally West himself. It turns out that the hero hung up his costume as the hero and has since been missing. There's a bit of interaction between the family, but then we find out that David has his father's powers. The comic also hints at David inheriting something else from his father as well, but then they cut off before we find out what it is. Wally says that his son is a good kid, but he still needs to learn not to use his speed, only for the character to be thrown into situations where he has no other option. After David saves another kid's life, he's left badly injured because he failed to inherit the same aura that usually protects Wally from his speed. Additionally, a huge syndicate. As Wally hurries off to get David to the hospital, Diane is left alone to fill in for a lot of the story's exposition. We find out that she's actually Bonnie from the story's start, and the thing that she almost told Wally was apparently some paperwork showing that she actually worked for a huge syndicate. Further details on how things go are somewhat iffy, but we do learn that the person behind the syndicate has a power that allows him to look into anyone's history just by touching them once. The two are then worked together to put a stop to him and ended up falling in love with each other. However, Diogenes, in his last moments of freedom, touches both of them on the shoulder and finds out all he needs to know about them in an instant. Now that we've basically caught up to the events that lead us to the current point in time, in the previous meeting, we saw Wally hang up his costume and both of them go under witness protection under new names. This leaves us having to catch up with Diogenes. While he's in prison, he's visited by Captain Cold, who's been busy locating the hero and his family. The couple then learns about David's condition and are suddenly swept away by Diogenes, who only wants to distract them until David is kidnapped. Moreover, the rogue wreaks havoc. We're then thrown into a bunch of scenes showing the rogues as they wreak havoc in multiple ways while Wally is trying to find his flash ring. Now that he has his scarlet suit, he goes off to make quick work of the villains. The rogues include such villains as Weather Wizard, Rainbow Raider, Captain Cold, and Golden Glider. After defeating them, he has a battle with Paradox and finally finds out where Diogenes is, along with the possible location of his son. During an experiment in which Diogenes' son tries to get a hold of the Flash's power, Wally arrives on time with his speedster suit. Though not much has happened other than their experiment going wrong, leaving both Diogenes and his son dead, that seems to be mainly it for the plot. The experimental material is the same substance that gives Flash his powers and is left in the open, giving David a chance to get his powers while Wally himself is powerless. Now we jump into the what if side of the story as we head back to when Wave Rider first touched Wally. This only means that the story is left unsettled as Bonnie never gives the papers to Wally and is instead approached by Diogenes' son, which is a pretty sad ending. Finally, a surprisingly big story. All in all, we were pretty surprised by just how big the story was. It was full of what ifs on top of more what ifs as Wally gave up his identity and life when starting a new life with his son and wife. That was then undone and led to him having to fight against the rogues. Admittedly, it was kind of lacking in details and final touches, especially when it came to the exposition and backstory. Not just that, but when they were showing what led them to go into the witness protection program, the story was kind of muddy. Not only did they brush away a lot of important details, but there wasn't even any real insight into what Diogenes was the syndicate of. Even as the rogues finally show up, they're more like small distractions that try to stop the hero from finding his son, but with all that said, the comic was still delightful to read for most fans, and it's hard for us to be overly critical about it, since we don't really know if its flaws exist because of how old it is or because it's an annual. That leaves it with a lot of room for some flaws. That's a wrap for this video, my friends. What are your thoughts about the gruesome part of Wally's powers? Let us know in the comments below. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.